Hi, everyone. We have been talking a lot about solving equations, combining like terms, things like that. Um, we are going to look at solving equations when those variables are on both sides of the equal sign. Okay. So for example, looking at that, we can see that here we've got this example, negative 6r is equal to negative 7r plus 9. So the main goal when solving these types of equations is to always get the terms with the variables to one side of the equal sign, and then all the terms without variables to the other side of the equal sign. And that's where we can always look at our line. We can separate each side of the equation using that equal sign. So in this case, we've got this negative 6r on one side, and then we've got the negative 7r plus 9 on the other. So a good step for this is we have the negative 6r by itself already. So maybe we just want to move this negative 7r to the other side as well. Now, this is where if we have a negative 7r, we're going to use the inverse operation. And I know some of you are looking at this saying, okay, so if we knew what r was, we'd multiply. So the inverse is division. However, that only works when you're trying to get the variable completely by itself. So in this case, we're actually going to take the variable with us when we move over. So we're going to be looking at either adding or subtracting the negative 7r together. Okay, so in this case, since we have a negative 7r, the inverse is going to be to add 7r to both sides. So we're going to add 7r, add 7r. And what happens here is this is just going to cancel and leave us with 0 plus 9. We can actually just drop the 0 altogether. And then negative 6r plus 7r, that's where we're going to go back to our rules with integers. We're going to look at that we have different signs and we're adding these numbers together. So with adding two numbers with different signs, we're actually going to be finding the difference between the two and then keeping the sign of the larger number. So in this case, the difference between 7 and 6 is just going to be 1. And then since the 7 here is the bigger number and it's a positive number, we're going to leave this as a positive. So this becomes 1r, or we could actually just say r equals, and then we'll just bring down the 9. Okay, so it just adds that additional step of getting those variables to one side before you actually complete the equation solving for that variable, what the variable is going to be equal to. So we're just going to take a look at a couple of examples of this, and I encourage you try these examples out. That way you can see how it's solved. You can check and make sure you're following the steps. Okay. So looking at this example, we've got a negative 7, and I'm going to rewrite this over here. Negative 7 minus a 9m is equal to that negative 8m. So I'm going to begin just by drawing that line to separate the equal sign. Okay. And if we look here, we can already see that we have a negative 8m by itself. So the easiest thing to do is to move this variable to the other side. So in that case, we have a negative 7 minus 9. So the inverse operation is going to be just to add 9m. And then whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So we're going to add 9m to the other side as well. And remember, the reason why we're adding or subtracting is we want to take that variable with us when we move. Okay, we're not isolating the variable just yet. So this is going to cancel for us, leaving us with just negative 7 is equal to, and then this goes back to our rules with integers, adding integers. If the signs are different, we are going to find the difference between the two and then keep the sign of the larger number. So the difference between 9 and 8 is just 1. And then we're just going to bring our variable down. And notice I didn't write the 1 because we would end up just dropping the 1 anyways. And we would say that m is equal to negative 7. Even though it's flipped the other way, it still says the same thing. Okay, you can go back to and we can double check our answer, which I encourage you to do. So we've got negative 7 minus 9. Now, instead of writing this variable, I found that the variable is equal to negative 7. So I'm just going to plug in that variable. And then I've got negative 8 And then we're going to plug in the variable again, which is -7. So now I'm going to do my multiplication first. Anytime you have this number right next to a parentheses, it's going to tell you to multiply. -9 times a -7 is going to give you a 63. Now, when we look at the signs, we have two negative numbers. So our answer is actually going to be a positive answer. And then over here, we've got a -8 times a -7, which is going to multiply together to give you 56. And then again, it's going to be a positive answer because you're multiplying a negative times a negative. Now, when we add -7 plus 63, we are going to look at, we have add addition of two numbers with different signs. So we're actually going to find the difference. We're going to say 63 minus 7 is going to give you 56. And then since the 63 was the bigger number, we're going to keep that sign, which is a positive number. So this is telling you that this is actually going to check and that your answer is -7. All right. Now let's look at it. Another one. Now we're solving for R. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this. Give us some space. We've got -7R plus 8 is equal to -10 minus 5R. Now, in this case, but the last couple of questions that we solved, we had the variable was by itself on one side, so it's easy to move over. In this case, we have variables on both sides, and then we also have numbers without variables on both sides as well. So it really doesn't matter which side you want to move them to, you're just going to follow the same steps. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and get the variables to the left. Okay, so I'm going to look at this -5R, and I'm going to say the inverse is going to be to add 5R to both sides. And I have to do it to both sides. And I'm bringing the variable width, so that's why I'm doing addition. This is going to cancel. And then -7R plus 5R, we go back to our rules with adding integers. The signs are different, so we're going to find the difference, which is 2R. And then we're going to go back and keep the sign of the larger number. So we're looking at 7 and 5, and since the 7 is greater than 5, and in this case, we're looking at absolute values, okay? So absolute value, 7 is bigger than 5, and since the 7 is negative, we're going to keep that as a -2R, okay? And then I'm just gonna go ahead and rewrite this. Plus 8 is equal to -10. So now we've got the variables on one side. We want to get this 8 to the other side now. We're going to subtract 8 from both sides. This will cancel. -10 minus a -8. We're going to go ahead and just change the sign to addition, and then this has to change to the opposite. With the rules with subtraction, you're going to add the opposite of that number, of the second number. So -10 plus a -8, we're just going to add these together because the signs are the same. So this is going to become 18. And then we're going to keep the sign that we were adding. Okay. A little bit different than multiplication and division rules. And then we have -2R is equal to -18. Now we want to go through and we want to isolate this variable. So in order to isolate the variable, we are going to divide both sides by 2. Whatever number is with the variable, that's what we're going to divide by. And this is going to give us an answer of R is equal to, with division rules, we're going to divide like normal. So 18 divided by 2 is 9. And then with division rules, it's the same as multiplication. Same signs are going to give you a positive answer. Different signs are going to give you a negative answer. So in this case, we divided a negative by a negative, so the signs are the same. So we're actually going to get a positive answer for this question. So our answer will be R is equal to 9. And you could go back and check your answer. -7 times 9 plus 8 is equal to -10 minus 5 times 9. Okay, and then when we keep going with this, -7 times 9 is going to be, and I'll write this up here, -63 plus 8, and then -10 minus 45. So negative 63 plus a positive 8, we are going to actually find the difference between the two, which is going to be 55. And then we're going to keep the sign of that bigger absolute value, okay, which is going to be 63. So it's negative. So we get a negative 55. And then negative 10 minus 45, we're actually going to add the opposite. We're just going to add these numbers because the signs are the same. So we get a negative 55 as well. So this is going to tell us that yes, that answer is going to check, and our answer will be R is equal to 9. Let's look at one more of these examples. This one has some additional steps to it, okay? So this is where we can see we've got a negative 10R plus 8 is equal to negative R minus 10 minus 7R. The first thing we want to do is we want to combine like terms on both sides of the equal sign. So you can only combine like terms on either side. So negative 10R plus 8, we can't combine those together. One has a variable, one does not. On this side, we have got negative R minus 10 minus 7R. So we can actually combine this negative R and this negative 7 before we begin moving any of these numbers. So we get negative 10R plus 8 is equal to negative 1 minus a 7 is actually going to be negative 1 minus 7. We're going to add the opposite. So this is going to give us a negative 8. So we get negative 8R minus 10. And then we can go back and I'm going to draw this line again for us, separate the equal sign. We want to get the variables to one side, and we want to get those numbers without the variables to the other. So I'm just going to go ahead and I've got a minus 8R. I'm going to add 8R to both sides, plus 8R. This is going to cancel for us. Negative 10 plus 8, the signs are different. We'll find the difference. Keep the sign of the greater absolute value, which is 10. So our answer is negative 2R plus 8 is equal to negative 10. And then I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides. Subtract 8. This will cancel for us. Negative 10 minus 8, we're going to add the opposite. So we're going to change this to addition, change the 8 to a negative. These numbers have the same sign. So we're just going to add them together, 18, and then keep the sign that we added. So we get negative 2R is equal to negative 18. And then one more step, we want to get this variable completely by itself by dividing both sides by this number 2. And we get R is equal to positive 9. Okay, now we can go back through and we can plug this in. We've got a negative, and I'll go ahead and get rid of this. We've got a negative 10 times 9 plus 8. And then on this side, we've got a negative and then times 9 minus 10 minus 7 times 9. So we get negative 90 plus 8. And we get negative, this is actually a negative 1 times a 9. So we actually get a negative 9 minus 10 minus 63, because negative 7 times a positive 9 is 63, be a negative answer. This is going to be a negative 82. And then we've got negative 9 plus a negative 10, which is negative 19 minus 63. We're going to add the opposite. So we're just going to add these up, 63 and 19. And I'll change, there we go, change this, 63 plus 19. 9 plus 3 is 12. And this becomes an 8. So this is going to give us, and this is going to give us an 82, but remember we added two negative numbers, so it's a negative 82. So this is going to show that our answer does check, and that our answer for this variable, for this equation, is going to be R equals 9.